reports Russian forces are moving closer to Kiev. Leaders from the U.S., EU, Australia, and Japan announced harsh new sanctions against Russia. Tougher new measures will likely impact Moscow's key tech imports in various sectors. South Korea prepares to take action if the Ukraine crisis disrupts energy shipments. Stocks are rattled and the country braces itself for potential economic impact from sanctions against Russia. Hello, we're wrapping up the week well. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. With reports of missile attack, sirens have been ringing out across Kiev all morning. There are reports of Ukrainian security forces leaving the city police headquarters with weapons and ammo, apparently heading towards the northern district where fighting has been reported. We have our Song Yujin standing by on the line for us. Yujin, do fill us in.
Well, Daniel, the latest is that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says that Moscow will only be ready to hold talks with Kiev once Ukraine's military has laid down its arms. That's according to AFP from just a few moments ago and comes following comments from a Kremlin spokesperson earlier this evening who said that Moscow will retaliate against any Western-led sanctions against Russia. Since the invasion started on Thursday, Russian troops have been entering Ukraine from the north, east, and south. Ukraine's Interior Ministry said Ukrainian forces blew up 2 bridges near Kiev to try and stop them, but it does seem like Russian forces have now arrived in the capital, Kiev. The Associated Press reports that the Ukrainian troops are fighting the Russians just to the city's northwest. Also, Friday morning, the Russians seized control of the nuclear plant at Chernobyl after a fierce battle.
Yesterday, February 24th, a subdivision of the Russian airborne forces took the territory around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant under their control.
Eugene, do we have updates on military, civilian, and casualties?
Well, Russia is calling the first day of its offensive a success, claiming to have destroyed 83 Ukrainian military facilities. The government of Ukraine says troops are near the capital. One of its fighter jets, it says, has been shot down over the city. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said in a televised address on Friday that Russia is targeting not only the military, but civilians too. President Zelensky said at least 137 people have lost their lives, mostly Ukrainians, and 316 people have been injured as of Friday morning. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry said its armed forces have inflicted some 800 casualties on Russian forces since the invasion began.
With air raids, shelters are set up across the country. The subway stations are serving such purpose as well. Cars are pouring out of Kiev, heading to other border nations. How are the people of Ukraine dealing with the crisis?
Well, people awoke to what some have been quoted as calling the worst sunrise in their lives. According to the UN Refugee Agency, more than 100,000 Ukrainians and local residents have fled their homes after the attacks began. Take a listen.
Well, we started our journey last April when the first escalation
Last April?
Yep. After the first escalation from Russia troops, and we moved from Kharkiv to Kyiv. And
on the ground, people are piling into cars and trains to cross into neighboring countries, including Romania, Moldova, Poland, and Hungary. Those who stay behind are seeking refuge in underground bunkers and subway stations. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, Eugene, thank you for those updates. Moving on, President Moon Jae-in ordered officials to take preemptive action regarding the Ukrainian situation and its impact. Senior South Korean and U.S. diplomats strongly condemned the attack. The government continues working to help Korean nationals in Ukraine evacuate. Yoon Jung-min brings the updates.
Following the Russian attack on Ukraine, President Moon Jae-in ordered his officials on Friday to monitor the situation and deal with the issue in a preemptive manner through a task force that lately has been active every day. The Korean government is keeping a close eye on the impact of the developments in Ukraine on Korean nationals there, as well as on the global and Korean economies. In a phone call on Friday, Seoul's Vice Foreign Minister Choi Jong-gun and his U.S. counterpart, Wendy Sherman, strongly condemned Russia's attack and called for it to stop immediately. They reaffirmed the need for a united international response and their country's unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Che emphasized that South Korea will take active part in international efforts for a peaceful resolution, including economic sanctions. Regarding the evacuation of Korean nationals in Ukraine, Seoul's Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong spoke at the National Assembly on Friday, saying 36 people are fully ready to evacuate this week if possible. Chung added some Koreans were trying to get to Lviv but had to return because of heavy traffic, and they plan to give it another try soon. As of Thursday, 64 South Koreans remain in Ukraine. Seoul's foreign ministry said 11 of them were known to be moving to border regions, and one of them has already left for Poland. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Russia is a significant trading partner for South Korea as a source of some important raw materials, so strong measures against Moscow could adversely affect Seoul. The financial aspect could prevent some issues too. Kim Ji-yeon sheds light on the sanctions' potential impact.
The sanctions unleashed by the United States and the European Union in response to Russia's attack on Ukraine are reportedly expected to have an impact on South Korean companies. U.S. economic sanctions package targets Moscow's banking, technology, and aerospace sectors aimed at choking off Russian access to a range of U.S. technology. Reuters and various other media outlets based in the West said the EU has also decided to place a second package of sanctions on Russia that will affect 70% of Russia's banking and tech sectors. This includes semiconductors, which is one of the most important export items for South Korea, which also relies on imports for certain chip components. Some experts have said that around 50% of rare gas elements, including neon and krypton, which are necessary for the production of automotive chips and semiconductors in general, are from Russia and Ukraine. However, one expert told Arirang that Korean companies would not be affected by these issues in the short term.
Semiconductors, as you know, we have problems in production already because of increased demand. And the bottlenecks, transportation bottlenecks. So it'll definitely have problems there. But in the very short term, and I'm saying over the next month or two, it may not be as big a problem because my understanding is that they have a lot of inventory on these. So it doesn't. My understanding is that it doesn't take a lot to stockpile what they need for the next few months, and that's what they did.
However, the expert did say the U.S.-led financial sanctions against two of Russia's largest banks are going to cause the biggest uncertainties globally and through Russia, since these banks cannot handle any dollar-related transactions. This means Korean automobile exporters could take a hit because they're a significant part of Korea's exports to Russia. Customs data shows Russia is South Korea's 10th largest trading partner, with Seoul's exports to Moscow reaching nearly $10 billion last year. So far, around 120 Korean companies have been doing business in Russia and 13 in Ukraine. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Equity markets around the world plunged due to concerns over economic disruptions. Just a day later, there are some differences to note. Lee Dae-yeon helps us look beyond the figures.
Following U.S. President Joe Biden's latest sanctions on Russia, the U.S. stock markets recovered on Thursday local time. The sharp turnaround on Wall Street following a series of tough sanctions by the U.S., EU, and other countries provided some relief to nervous investors. The Dow Jones closed at around 33,000, up nearly 0.3%, with the S&P 500 rising 1.5% and Nasdaq jumping 3.3%. Meanwhile, on Friday, Korea's benchmark KOSPI recovered from hitting its lowest point of the month the previous day by rising over 1%, closing at around 2,670 level. In a parliamentary meeting on Friday, South Korea's trade ministry said there will be limited impact. But still, there are some concerns surrounding South Korea's businesses in Russia.
Russia's invasion is being considered as one of the most serious crises. Russia only accounts for 1.5% of the South Korea's export, but still this could become a much bigger economic issue. So it's necessary to prepare for damage that will be felt by local exporters amid trade sanctions with Russia.
Taxes on fuel prices will also be monitored by the Trade Ministry. Although the country had already lowered fuel taxes until April this year, the ministry has vowed to extend that deadline if needed. The ministry said new bills to secure commodities amid the price surge are also being considered. He added there is a 3-month stockpile of materials needed to produce semiconductors. There was another emergency meeting held today to discuss the fallout from the Russia-Ukraine crisis in terms of what kind of damage it could do to South Korea's economy. In the meeting, the ministry also pledged government support for exporters and importers of around $1.6 billion if needed. To prevent a disruption of energy supplies, the government's going to secure more oil and other commodities and import extra supplies from Australia and South America. The government also promised to set up a hotline for South Korean companies in Russia. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
The nation's daily COVID-19 tally inched down slightly, but the peak is expected to be reached in just a few weeks. Authorities dramatically loosened select rules on self-isolation as well. Shin Yeon has the latest.
South Korea on Friday reported 165,890 new COVID-19 infections. Despite the drop in cases, the number of critically ill rose by 74 to 655. The Prime Minister on Friday said Omicron will most likely peak by mid-March, when daily infections could surpass 250,000. He added how authorities will address the situation.
The government will supplement the country's medical system so that it can contain the spread of Omicron effectively. In order for us to do that, we will first take some of the burden off the overloaded workers at medical clinics.
The Prime Minister said some 3,000 public workers will be dispatched to different regions along with 1,000 military personnel to support the medical system. Authorities are also set to change the quarantine rules for unvaccinated people who live with a COVID-19 patient. As of now, unvaccinated cohabitants are required to self-isolate for 7 days. But from March, they won't have to quarantine and instead will be monitored for 10 days. They're also asked to get a single PCR test in the first 3 days. Then on the 7th day of their monitoring, they will be advised to test themselves with a home screening kit. But neither of these tests are mandatory. Authorities are also thinking of designating an emergency room just for young children amid the growing number of new infections found among those aged 18 and below. The number of infections found in this age group has more than doubled compared to last week. As of Wednesday, they took up more than 26% of new infections. Authorities said they would increase the number of hospital beds just for young children and teens to some 860. There's also some 95 centers nationwide that provide medical counseling and diagnosis for children and teens recovering from COVID-19 at home. Authorities are also considering tests that don't use the invasive and sometimes painful nasal swabs and instead use a saliva-based PCR test that only requires people to spit into a tube. Once the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety gives the green light, this test will be used at screening centers and at schools. Shin Yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea will be home to a new global biomanufacturing training hub. Starting July, hundreds of professionals from developing countries will be groomed so the participants can learn to manufacture vaccines and biological products. Min Soo-kyun provides a glimpse of what to expect.
South Korea will become a global biomanufacturing training hub for the World Health Organization. Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said he was pleased to announce South Korea and hoped this will help more countries improve their biomanufacturing capabilities. The new training hub will help low and middle income countries produce not just vaccines but other biological products. This comes after the successful establishment of a global mRNA vaccine technology transfer hub in South Africa last year.
The government of the Republic of Korea has offered a huge facility that conducts biomanufacturing training locally and will expand its operations to accommodate trainees from other countries.
The training facilities will be located in two areas outside South Korea's capital, one in Songdo, Incheon, and the other in Osung, Chungcheongbuk-do province, where they're already providing biomanufacturing training for local companies. Starting in July, South Korea will train 370 professionals from around the world. Of them, 100 trainees will go on a 2-week course for vaccine and biologics development and production, while 210 others will go on a 3-week course for quality management standards in pharmaceuticals. And the remaining 60 trainees will gain hands-on experience in pharmaceutical product manufacturing. By 2025, the government plans to invite 2,000 trainees from developing countries every year, with an ambitious goal of setting up 2 more training facilities by next year. Seoul's health ministry said it hopes this would be an opportunity for South Korea to become a leading nation in the bioindustry field.
Being the only country that's gone from being an aid recipient to a donor, South Korea's nomination as a global training hub by the WHO will serve as an opportunity for the country to share its experience in the bio field. And by actively addressing global inequalities in access to vaccines and strengthening health and safety networks around the world, it will serve as an opportunity for South Korea to demonstrate its global leadership credentials.
The ministry also added that it will establish a joint steering committee and hold regular meetings with the WHO to further develop the curriculum and to select trainees for the program. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
With the Ukraine crisis sparking energy concerns, President Moon Jae-in said South Korea will use existing nuclear power plants over the next 6 decades. The remarks were made at a stable power supply meeting on Friday in response to local concerns of the country's plans to phase out nuclear reactors, which includes halting new constructions and not extending operations of retiring ones. This transition is to be carried out over a long period of time, gradually until 2084. Moon highlighted the importance of safety inspections, as this is cited as the main reasons the construction of 4 nuclear reactors were delayed. The U.S. returned some of its military bases in South Korea. With the agreement, around 10% of the Yongsan Garrison has now been returned to Korea. Bae Eun-ji tells us more.
During a Status of Forces Agreement Joint Committee Representative Conference on Friday, the U.S. government agreed to return parts of its military sites to South Korea. This included multiple parcels of the Yongsan Garrison located in the center of Seoul and Camp Red Cloud in the city of Uijeongbu. The water detention basin in Camp Stanley has also been returned. Altogether, this is nearly 1 million square meters of land, and is the second time that the U.S. has returned parts of its Yongsan military site after returning 53,000 square meters in December 2020. On Friday, the U.S. returned 165,000 square meters of the Yongsan Garrison, including 2 areas in its main post and 1 area in the south post. In July last year, the 2 countries agreed that a quarter of the Yongsan Garrison will be returned to Korea by early 2022. With Friday's agreement, a total of around 10% of the Yongsan Garrison has now been returned to Korea.
First, today we will receive the 165,000 meters of land and receive a considerable amount of land within the first half of this year. This is expected to speed up the process of creating the Yongsan Park.
As for the returned land of Camp Red Cloud, the Uijeongbu city government said that it'll build a large e-commerce logistics complex there to boost the local economy. The 2 sides also agreed to continue discussions on responsible ways to resolve the contamination issue and ways to enhance environmental management. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Elsewhere around the world, a 6.2 magnitude earthquake hit West Sumatra Island. Indonesia's meteorological agency said Friday it struck about 17 kilometers northeast of the island at around 8:40 a.m. local time. The earthquake, which rocked buildings in neighboring Singapore and Malaysia, has injured around 50 people and caused at least 6 deaths. The death toll is expected to rise as some of the injured are in serious condition. The quake damaged hundreds of houses and other buildings and forced around 5,000 people to flee homes, with landslides and aftershocks occurring afterwards. South Korea's biggest drone expo is taking place in Busan. Nearly 140 firms and institutes are taking part. Drone Show Korea 2022, organized by the Korea Unmanned Vehicle System Association and BEXCO, runs until Saturday under the theme Connected by Drone. Co-hosted by the port city and related government ministries, the 3-day trade show also held a series of international conferences on new drone technologies, regulations, safety issues, industry strategies, and military applications. Visitors can enjoy several events on the sidelines, including a hands-on drone delivery program, games, and other activities. Earlier, Arirang News Center invited Olympic skeleton racer Jung Seung-gi to the studio. The 22-year-old believes he'll have what it takes to get on the podium 4 years from now. Our Olympic correspondent Han Sung-woo has the full story.
10th in the world. That's how good Beijing 2022 skeleton racer Jung Seung-gi has become since jointly carrying the Olympic flag into the opening ceremony of the previous Winter Games in Pyeongchang as a bright young prospect 4 years ago.
What an honor it was for me to carry the Olympic flag that day when my home country was hosting the Games. The experience pushed me to work even harder to achieve my dream of competing on the grandest stage.
Chung was the only Korean athlete at the Beijing Winter Olympics to finish among the top 10 in a sliding event, an accomplishment he made despite being without a racer's most trusted companion, his helmet.
This helmet with Kobuksan, or the Korean battleship turtle ship, has the Korean flag on the back. The reason I had the Kobuksan imprinted on this helmet was to remind myself to be fearless, like the warship when racing down the track. But inside, I was denied permission from the IOC to wear this helmet, so instead, I decided to spell the word Kobuksan out on this helmet, which I actually wore in competition.
Racing with him in the heats as both a compatriot and competitor, though, was 2018 gold medalist Yoon Sung-bin, who, despite going through a slump, helped Chung relieve the anxiety that naturally comes with an Olympic debut.
Many people in Korea equate skeleton racing with Yoon Sung-bin, and I do too. He's a legend whose success gives me confidence that I can also achieve great things in the sport. I learned a lot from competing against him in Beijing. Simply racing in his presence had a positive influence on me.
Not even a week has passed since the Winter Olympics came to an end. But Chung, hungry for more, already has his eyes set on making history in the next one.
Like we discussed, my biggest competitive advantage lies in my start, which I'll have to improve. As for my steering, it's a matter of experience. With an extra 4 years under my belt, I think I'll have what it takes to win a medal in Italy.
Raising hopes that in Milano Cortina 2026, Korea may see 2 of its skeleton racers, including a rejuvenated Yoon, grace the Olympic podium.
In 4 years, I see myself sitting right here with a shiny medal in my hand.
Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
Early spring-like conditions are in the forecast this weekend. The capital region will be warm with maximum temperatures hiking up to 10 degrees Celsius tomorrow. However, some patchy rain or snow is expected nationwide. Rain will start from central regions in the morning and they will gradually spread across the nation. Expect about 5 millimeters for most inland regions. For Gangwon-do and eastern Gyeonggi-do provinces, where temperatures will be below freezing at times, rain will turn into snow. Mountainous regions will see heavier snowfall of up to 8 centimeters. Any combination of rain or melted snow could cause slippery roads, so please be extra careful when driving. Morning lows will be 2 to 6 degrees higher than today. Seoul will start off at 3 degrees Celsius. And warm conditions are forecast for the daytime. Daejeon will get up to 12 degrees. Gwangju 14, Daegu and Gyeongju will be reaching 15 degrees. Mild conditions will continue for the time being, but finest concentrations may also rise. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.